Hi, I'm Pam Blizzard from Recovered Peace.
And I'm Lachelle Burkett with Hope Redefined.
And I'm Bonnie Burns of Strong Wives. We're so glad you're joining us. Welcome back to another episode of Hope for Wives. Today, we are continuing our discussion around trust. And our specific topic today is, how do I ever trust my partner again? How will I ever trust that he loves me, will protect me, and won't do this to me again? If I were hurting and sick, how do I trust that he won't abandon me? So we're just going to jump right in and start by sharing some of our personal experiences in losing trust with our husbands.
God, where do I start? You don't want to hear this story. Ay. Our story is a little unique in that the first year that we knew each other, we became very fast friends, platonic friends. I mean, we were buddies. We talked on the phone almost every night. We were dating other people from time to time, and we would share about how that was going with each other. So we had a year of building trust. He had plenty of opportunities to break that trust, and he didn't. In hindsight, when I look backwards to when we crossed that line into a romantic relationship, there were red flags almost immediately. So trust was built up over a year and then chipped away at, once we crossed that line, chipped away little by little by little, that tip of the iceberg, until there were some major discoveries. And let me just say this, that I made the mistake through several cycles of watching for behavior, looking for things to trust. I was looking for them. In hindsight, what ended up working for us was him surprising me with reasons to trust him, going out of his way to be transparent when he didn't need to come and connect with me, almost to the point of being annoying. And he went out of his way. And that was really the solid, strong trust, when he went out of his way and made a mindful effort to rebuild trust.
So I just love to give trust away. I do. I love to give trust away. I think it's because either I was raised this way or it's an innate personality thing. I trust until someone gives me a reason not to, but then I always give a lot of grace. That being said, after the first D-Day, quick forgiveness, gave him trust, carte blanche. Here it is. I know you don't want to do it again. I mean, he did. He apologized and all this stuff. I took it. Second D-Day, I gave it back to him, but not as much before. And I will say, after these first two D-Days, there were no real recovery behaviors. We didn't even know the recovery world. Things just went underground, and he white knuckled a while. And so third D-Day, there was no giving the trust back. There was a shift in me that there would have to be a re-earning of trust. But what did losing trust look like? It was devastating, because we went back, the last episode, we talked about being stupid and how could I not see this? There was a lot of that going on. And so losing trust in him, it affected the trust I had in myself also, but losing trust in him was a true death. And we've talked about that in the betrayal trauma episode of what it's like. That death of trust for me was the death of him. It was so neurologically, my mind blew up once that moment happened, where I knew all the things. There was the kitchen table confession. So that losing trust in him was apocalyptic. Let's put it that way. It was the death of former things, and it was devastating.
The slow realization of the trust that was lost was also incredibly difficult. I remember one night laying in bed next to him, and I'm laying there in the dark, and I'm just trying to quiet myself to go to sleep. And all of a sudden I just blurt out, "I don't even know who you are. I feel like I'm laying in bed with a stranger. Like, and it was just my moment of like, all my reality was not lining up anymore. In my particular story, building trust with a man was a really, really big deal. So to be betrayed again by a man was difficult. It was, I mean, I don't even think the word difficult consumes what all of us are trying to express in the devastation of this. But that was another piece of this puzzle, was just how long it took me. And sometimes I still don't even think I understand the full impact of losing that trust. Like I've tried to do due diligence with that and sit with the reality of the story and the losses and grievances that come with it. But then there's all of a sudden like those really bizarre moments where we're driving down the road and some country western song comes on and I want to just vomit over the ridiculousness of the song. Then I realize that's because that's broken trust, right? That's a place that was wounded. I can't even imagine what that person is singing about because that's not accurate for me.
If I could just say, yes, thank
Yes.
you for acknowledging that it is a death, it's a loss. It is something to grieve. It is a part of who we were. It's an aspect of our personality and our memories and our values, a big chunk of us that we lost. So thank you for acknowledging that.
So if we move on into our next question, it is, what do we need to rebuild trust in our relationship?
I think it is super important for us to understand by nature, we do not know how to rebuild trust. This was not a tool that was given to us in school. We didn't take a class on it. This was a big aha moment for me. So that's why I'm going to share it. Because what I came to realize was there were two types of relationships that I was familiar with. I either had a relationship which was family connected. Trust was given simply because of us having the shared last name or proximity or relationship. Like, and it wasn't necessarily that it was actually trust, it was just a requirement to stay in space with that other person, right? The whole blood's thicker than water mentality. And so if there was a wrong, if there was something that got broken, there was no repair. You just had to get over it. Like somehow, some way. Now, every person in our family dealt with the getting over it differently. Some withdrew, some would get angry. It looks different for everybody's family. So rebuilding trust wasn't something that I was given even in my family of origin. And then I thought about the other type of relationship that I had, which was friendship. And so in my friendships, if there was something that happened in that relationship where trust was broken, my understanding is that it was done. It's over. Like there's no need for us, because I didn't know that there was such a thing as rebuilding trust. We cut that off and we're done. Now, some of this was modeled behavior, right? And a lot of this came from the deficit of not knowing there was other tools out there. So I think it's important when we start talking about what do we need to rebuild trust in our relationship. I always like to start from a place of grace to help both husband and wife understand these are not tools that you potentially just happen to have in your pocket and you're maliciously not pulling it out. Like this is a whole new concept for a lot of people to know, oh my gosh, you mean I need to rebuild something? Like it, because the concept of the loss of trust, right? Bonnie, you've laid it out so well. Like it is a death. So now we're talking about a resurrection of some form or fashion, right? And so that's what I love about this question, is about what do we need to rebuild the trust, is first and foremost understand that this isn't something that you have or had and you just didn't use it.
That's so important to validate. We just don't inherently know how to do this. And I wish we could come up with a different term besides rebuild, because rebuild almost implies that if you have a brick building and it falls down, you take the same bricks and you put it
Yep.
back up again. So the concept I want to talk about is throwing away all your old ideas about what that looks like, what it should look like, and be teachable. There's some great education from Dr. Jake Porter about coupleship, and he brings into it the neurobiology of trauma and attachment theory and the work of Dr. Stan Tatkin and others. And he talks about the couple bubble. And so there's this whole acknowledgement that a visual that a relationship is a three-legged stool, There's you, there's me, and there's the relationship, which is a separate entity. And so I don't want my husband to protect just me and my heart. I want him to protect the relationship. And I want him to show me that the relationship comes first. So in the past, there was this unspoken rule that his mom and his family come first because family is everything. Family, family, family. But in this new structure, the relationship comes first. He and I are a team. Dr. Porter talks about this concept of thirds, that his mom now is a third. Even our child, whom we love and used to be the center of our relationship, is now a third. He's important, still important, still there for him, but that he and I negotiate that the relationship comes first. The relationship comes before his hobbies, comes before his work. And again, this is not to be taken literally. It's something that needs, it's a discussion, it's a negotiation. In every conversation that I show up to, I show up for the relationship, not for my need to be right. We're building this trust structure around the relationship itself, not just my heart, not just my needs, my values for loyalty and monogamy, but it's just this whole picture of we're going to build some walls around this relationship where prior there had been some windows that cracked open. So we're going to shut the windows, lock the doors, and protect the relationship itself. And I didn't have that before. So that my old version of trust is, can I just trust you to always do what's right for me? And so now being more intentional about our relationship and that trust, then I show up that way too. I've learned that it's important for me to show up in that conversation about what's best for our relationship, not what's best for Zach or our son, or what's best for the family, what's best for you and I, because that's a version of putting on your own oxygen mask on first for the relationship. And so what's good for the relationship is good for me personally. It's a new paradigm for what a trusting relationship looks like for me. Before trust was, it's a new definition. Before I used to define trust as I'm going to watch everything you do and I'm going to evaluate, is what you're doing in my personal best interest?
So the question being, what do we need to rebuild trust in our relationship? We as a ministry, as Hope Redefined, do a ton of ministry work, which I believe you guys do too, helping the partner connect with herself in regards to we can't change other people. We can only be responsible for us. And the other thing we say consistently is, regardless of what happens in this relationship, I can heal, I can grow, I can mature. And so I'm going to answer this question from that angle of, for her. Again, I'm going to say it again, probably 4 more times. You cannot make another person show up the way that they could show up, because like we're saying, if we don't understand health, we don't know how to show up from health. I have this example, this consistent routine or fight that my husband and I would have. One big trigger for me in our story was him being late coming home from work. So he would say, I'll be home at 6. And I'd be like, okay, you'll be home at 6. And at 6:05, my blood pressure is rising. 6:10, I'm barely able to see because I'm so like seeing red at this point. And by the time he walks in the door at 6:17, I am breathing fire. And his response is, what is your deal? It's 17 minutes. And I say, you told me 6 o'clock and it's 6:17. You didn't even call me to tell me that you were going to be late. So let me unpack this entire thing. What's going on there is, I don't know this. I'm not conscious of what I'm doing, but what I'm doing is I am still trying to trust you at your word. And I need to see your actions and your words line up. So when you say I'll be home at 6 p.m. and your action tells me something different, we're not rebuilding trust. That's just that first part of like, why is she so adamant and why is she blowing her top over 17 minutes? That's why. She is desperate to rebuild trust. We do not want to live in relationships we don't trust people, right? That's why I said earlier that in friendships, if trust was broken, I'm out. Like, we don't stick around for that. In a marital relationship, and you're trying to desperately rebuild this, this is what she's trying to do, is grasp at anything to say he's doing something. His words and his actions are lining up. The next part of this is that after the whole I'm breathing fire, everything is exploding, and I'm angry because he's disregarded what he said he was going to do. And we start the yelling match. Then I would say, I don't trust you. And he'd go, well, what do I have to do for you to trust me? And I would respond with, I don't know. You screwed it up. You figure it out. That was the most honest answer that I actually ever gave him, because I did not know what I needed to rebuild trust. And so when we start to work together and they're asking that question, how do we rebuild trust? My first question to her is, what do you need to rebuild trust? And she'll be like, I don't know, right? Because we don't actually know. But let me tell you how this story would play out. Okay, so we go back to the conflict. I scream, I don't know, you screwed it up, you figure it out. So guess what my husband would begin to do? He would take out the trash. He would unload the dishwasher. He would begin to do tasks around the house. And then when I did not respond positively to the task, he would get upset with me and say that he can't do enough for me to rebuild trust. So here's what was happening. That is two people speaking two different languages. Because my husband's concept of rebuilding trust was just to be doing things. Somehow or another, I'll do myself back into a trusted relationship. And that wasn't what I needed. I needed to have consistent action over time. So I needed you to, if you say you're going to be home at 6 p.m., you get home at 6 p.m. Or I'm not a ridiculous individual. Or if I'm not going to be here at 6 p.m., I'm going to call you before 6 p.m. to say I'm going to be there at 6:17. Right? Like, I needed somebody to understand and take this very serious and be very intentional about connecting with me and creating what we now call safety. Right? So it was a combination. And so that's been one of the things that I think has been a big aha for a lot of us, is being able to go, I actually don't know what I need to rebuild trust. I just thought that if I just got mad that we didn't have it and I'm grieving it, that it would just magically come back around. And so again, I go back to, we weren't given this. So when you don't understand how to rebuild, you don't really know what you need for that rebuilding or that restructuring or that redesign, like Pam was talking about. It's really powerful for women to be able to start to discover what they need. And then once they figure out what they need, they have to learn how to share it. Ooh, doggies. That can be super hard.
Until you get it, and then it's so empowering. And so what Lachelle's talking about are boundaries. Yeah, in a nutshell. I wasn't good at boundaries until the third D-Day. And then, I was a queen of boundaries. Well, and there's a quote out there that says, your boundaries need not be an electric fence. It's just an energy coming from you that says, I will be respected. When you figure out what you need and you can build boundaries, my need had a lot to do with his business travel. So we have in place, to help me feel safe, several boundaries around his business travel. And you know what? I'll share some of them, because some of you may have business traveling husbands too. One is that he attends a Samson meeting while he's gone. If he had time to act out, he has time for a Samson meeting now. Another one is that he will check in with me several times a day. And it's not just a check-in, it's a FaceTime. And, it's just that personal connection. It's not because I must see where you are. It's not that. It's the personal connection. Other things is that he minimizes his drinking. We have very open communication if he needs to do social drinking with business associates. But all of those things help me feel safe. And by him meeting those boundaries with no pushback, with understanding that that's what I need to rebuild the trust, he jumps in with a full commitment. And it goes back to what Pam teaches. Tell your purple, pink polka dot bow tie.
If in order to feel safe in this relationship, I need my husband to wear a pink, purple polka dot bow tie every day, That's what I need. I don't have to explain it or defend it. There's no debate. My husband has two choices because boundaries are choices also. And boundaries are also, I want to stop and say, a roadmap to your heart. This is how you can access me. Yeah, there might be an electric fence there, but there's also a gate with guardrails on either side. So my husband now has a choice to either wear the pink, purple polka dot bow tie or not. His response to that is cold, hard data about his willingness to be a safe person, a trustworthy person in this relationship.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately all of our boundaries, and again, what I said before, it was real high level. All of our boundaries, I think, are we want to be heard and seen and accepted and validated, that we have these values of connection, checking in. It's not from control, not based on the value of control. It's based on the value of connection. That you accept my value system of when you say you're going to do something, you do it. If not, you communicate about it. And so boundaries are also requests. They're not just, hey, if you do this, this thing's going to happen. It's if you want to access me and my heart and my intimacy, emotional or otherwise, here's the behaviors between the guardrails. Anything outside of the guardrails, I'm not going to be so available to you. But if you can have your behavior between these guardrails, then you can have access to me. And my husband was grateful for very specific, detailed how-tos. I used to think my husband should be a mind reader and just know, well, doesn't it just make sense that if you're going to be late, you're going to call, right? But it didn't make sense to my husband because I'm going to stop and call, but I'm going to be there in 3 minutes. Well, just call, right? I think it's important that we do get specific about what we need. And yeah, I didn't really know what I needed. What helped me was to go back over past injuries. Let me go back to something in the past that hurt me or upset me and kind of start there as kind of a like, remember that time when you called and said you were bringing home pizza and you showed up with Chinese? Going forward, if there's a change in plans, just touch base with me because I value communication. I value my ability to plan and know what's going on. And it was hard for me to get specific because I felt like I was being controlling, but I wasn't because he still had the choice. I didn't control his choices to do it or not do it. I was making my preferences and needs known.
That's what we mean by you need to understand what you need. Because what you just said is clear communication with me is a need. And if you start to communicate with me better, well, more clear, whatever, clearer, that is going to rebuild trust. The other thing I've seen is a correlation if a woman's trying to figure out what she needs is if you know your love language from Gary Smalley, the 5 love languages, what I have found is that if you understand your love language and can begin to construct needs that complement your love language, it actually will rebuild trust faster for you. So, for example, if I have a woman I'm working with and her love language is quality time, one of her needs, most likely in rebuilding trust, is a date night or a check in or something that is a very intentional and it includes some element of quality time, right? If I have a woman who is maybe she's more about physical touch, like maybe that's her love language, then him intentionally seeking her out to hold her hand when they're in church or do certain things in a public setting helps her feel like trust is being rebuilt. So it's pretty fascinating. It just started like coming together. So if you can start to think about your love language and correlate, because obviously what that's doing is it's also speaking your language. So see why my husband loading the dishwasher and taking the trash out meant absolutely nothing to me, because my love language is not acts of service. My love language is words of affirmation. and gifts from the heart and intentionality of communication. So those are the things that I think are important for us to be able to do that. Now, can I talk to our husbands for just a second? Right. Well, I know that we've had several clinicians mention that they've shared our podcast with guys just to offer that perspective. If there's a guy listening to this podcast and he's like, well, that's helpful that she knows what she needs, but I'm still struggling to know how to rebuild trust. We actually have an acronym that we use in our ministry, and it's called VOWS, VOWS. And this is how I've seen it work well for guys as they're trying to rebuild trust. Vulnerability, take ownership for what you need to take ownership for, do your personal work, and create safety. VOWS. When a guy has the ability to offer that vulnerability, whether it's emotions or fears, I mean, I guess that is a emotion, but he's learning how to show up from a state of vulnerability with his wife, he'll start to rebuild trust with her, because suddenly she's beginning to see a different part of him that probably was there when they were dating. And she thought that was so endearing and loved it so much. Like, oh my gosh, he's just so available. He's so whatever. But over the course of time, it got lost. Right. And so that's like a little bit of this rekindling, but that ownership, when you make a mistake, you own it. P.S. That's an adult thing to do. Like, that's what adulting is, right? Is owning your stuff. And then, I've had guys go, well, what do you mean by doing your work? And what I mean by that is you have got to assess where you need to grow. And then you have to be able to do that for yourself, or seek it out, seek that help out, right? So if you're struggling with empathy, it's your job to go figure out how to grow in empathy.
Can I add something there?
Sure.
So your work is probably going to be painful. We recognize that, but it is so necessary, and you will be freed of so much bondage if you can turn around and look at your stuff, even the painful stuff, and work through it. Because once you work through it, it won't be as painful anymore. But I just wanted to offer that encouragement of why work is so important. It's not just important for her. It is super, it's for your coupleship, but it is freeing for you.
Agreed. And let me just offer a sense of clarification. When I say do your work, notice I did not say perform. Those are very different things. We're not saying, oh, you need to make sure that you check every box and it gets just right. It is about the refinement and the growth and the stretching and all the things that come for both people. She's growing and refining and stretching just as well. It just looks different, right? But so when I say do your work, I don't mean become a dancing monkey. Go do the things that are super hard, right? Her facing off with the betrayal and grief and the reality of loss of trust is not fun, right? And neither will you digging around in your old treasure chest of past trauma and hurts. That's not going to be fun either. But these are things that are necessary in order for a coupleship to heal and grow. And then that last one, that S again, is about rebuilding safety or creating opportunity for safety. So here's one safety thing that I'll give you. Respecting a woman's boundaries, even if you don't understand them or you don't agree with them, is still creating safety for her. So like Pam said, if she says to me, I got to wear a purple polka dotted bow tie, and you don't understand it, and you may not even agree with it, but you respect it, you're rebuilding trust.
I loved how you brought up the love languages. There's another piece to the love languages. If you can shoot a hole in your bucket. If you can be putting in all the appropriate love, you can be doing all the words for Lashal. But if you are criticizing her, if you are contemptuous with her, if you are defensive with her, or what's the other one? Stonewalling. Those things actually take out more than you're putting in. Rebuilding trust would mean watching your criticism and replacing it with a gentle startup. And these are from the Gottman. These are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Gottman says if these are in your relationship's probably doomed. Contempt is just intentional insults. Contempt can be sarcasm. Contempt is not encouraging. It's not building one another up. So the antidote to that is gratefulness and just building a culture of appreciation in your marriage. Defensiveness, I think we all know what that is. Putting yourself in a victim mode or attacking the other because you're trying to throw them off track. The antidote to defensiveness is ownership, part of the vows. And then stonewalling is the last thing, and that's refusing to talk about the hard things. Stonewalling is just walking away and not talking. You can't repair anything. You cannot create a new anything without conversation and sharing.
I think stonewalling's the worst because that's a form of abandonment and rejection and refusal to participate in the relationship. It's not making the relationship come first. I actually asked a group of women, what kind of things make you feel safe? And I have a few. Can I read them off?
Yeah.
When I'm triggered, you take steps to help me regulate. And for each woman, that's going to look different. Some women want their hands to be held. Some women want eye contact. I encourage women to come up with a list of what do you need from your partner to help you co-regulate. You don't comment on my own recovery in a negative way. You're not telling me I'm taking too long or I'm not working hard enough on it. You respect my privacy and my recovery work, in my journals, my meetings, my phone calls. You keep your word. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you say you're not going to do something, you don't do it. And not just for me, for other people too. You take responsibility for your own inner experience, your feelings, your thoughts and actions. You don't blame me or others for how you're feeling. You're able to agree to disagree. If I disagree, you respect it and you don't try to persuade me to your viewpoint with coercion. I feel heard and seen by you. If there's a misunderstanding, you start with assuming positive intent. You're willing to do any couples recovery request, if it's therapy, if it's a workshop, if it's a webinar. Dr. Jake has some great couples webinars, podcast, books. You're willing to lock arms with me and do it together, not for me, not for you, but for the relationship. If I did do something that hurt your feelings, you pause and you find a way to use positive communication. Like, Pam, when you said this or that, I felt sad, I felt hurt. Using really good communication. Resolving grievances and conflicts calmly. If I ask to see your phone, you show it to me without hesitation or comment. You don't interrupt me when I'm talking. You own your past mistakes. And when you make new ones, because we all do, I do, you do, everybody does, we own it immediately. When I talk about my problems or my emotions, you don't try to fix or change them. You listen, you reflect back, you just hold space for those emotions. You encourage me to grow, to make new friends, and to have my own interests that may be different than yours. You show me affection. You share household chores fairly. You don't isolate into personal interests and hobbies. You take time to make sure we're connected. So those are just a few. And it's perfectly okay to go to your husband and say, look, this is what I need. I'm a big fan of nonviolent communication theory that says, when you yell, I feel scared. If you yell, I will leave the room. It's equally important to say, when you surprise me with date night, I feel loved, I feel cherished, I feel safe. If you continue to surprise me, I will continue to open myself up to you emotionally and with more vulnerability. I know I had to change. I had to change showing up for every conversation, willing to protect the relationship rather than be right. That was something I struggled with and I had to work on. It's not a husband thing. It's also a wife thing. It's not according to gender. It's everybody. It's a human thing.
Yeah. I say that because when you're in the throes of parenthood, sometimes it's easy to start parenting each other. That is a lot of what you're refuting there. So, as we traditionally do, as we end a podcast episode, we want to leave you with some hope around trust and trust in your coupleship. So, ladies, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the biggest gift you can give yourself is permission to sit with the idea of trust and figure out what you need and who can help fulfill the need when it comes to rebuilding trust in the relationship. It's almost like you want to draw it out on a piece of paper and start identifying your needs and then being like, okay, is this a need that can be met by me? Is this a need that can be met by God? Is this a need that should be or could be met by my husband? Notice I said should be, because sometimes we are putting more on there than should be, because maybe there should be more in God's bucket than our husbands to create a sense of safety, a different sense of safety. But I would just say, at the end of the day, the biggest gift you can give yourself is to learn and move into self-awareness. You've got to discover you.
I think the word of hope that I want to leave with women is that if you don't feel trust, especially right after discovery, it's okay. Give yourself grace. If you don't feel trust, have good boundaries. Take it to the Lord. Take it to the Word, and that it is not primarily your responsibility to rebuild that trust. It's not on your shoulders. And if somebody's telling you or giving you a hard time because you don't trust yet, they don't understand betrayal trauma. Give yourself some grace, and it's not your job to look for trust. It's other people's jobs to present reasons repeatedly over time to show they are trustworthy, and just be open to seeing it. If it's in God's will, that behavior will demonstrate itself over time and be presented to you.
In my own story, there have been seasons where I've had to extend trust even when it was scary. I could sense in my spirit that it was what I was supposed to do. It wasn't that I was being willy-nilly about it like I was in the beginning, right? Like I said, I was so committed to trying to repair. And my understanding of repair was that I was the one that had to repair. And that was a real myth. But trust is broken. So I got to figure out how to fix it. Oh, I fix it by giving it to you quickly. My heart is breaking. Oh, I have to fix it by extending forgiveness. And I'll do that quickly. Our sex life is broken. Oh, I'll fix that by offering myself up sexually to you over and over again, thinking that it's somehow, some way that would repair whatever was broken. And then, but not recognizing that there was not even mutual, that there was a lot of things on his side that needed to be repaired. It's not something that we naturally know how to do.
So thank you for joining us for our big, deep subject. And we hope that in spite of it all, we're a bright spot on your recovery journey. If you'd like to leave us a question or comment, please go through the contact button on our website. And the website is hopeforwives.com, and that's FOR, hopeforwives.com. Also, help a friend by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes so others can find us. And we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks.
I trust that you will.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.